Misdirection is often associated with stage magicians and illusionists, but its influence extends far beyond entertainment. It is a fundamental tool of manipulation, present in politics, media, propaganda, marketing, and everyday interactions. Whether through sensory distraction, psychological influence, narrative control, or temporal distortion, misdirection shapes perception by guiding attention away from the truth. To resist it, one must learn not just to see, but to see what is meant to remain unseen. This guide explores 4 core categories of misdirection: physical, psychological, narrative, and temporal, each exploiting different aspects of human perception and cognition. Physical misdirection manipulates sensory focus, steering attention toward what is meant to be noticed, while the real action takes place elsewhere. Psychological misdirection operates at the level of thought, using cognitive biases and assumptions to lead individuals to false conclusions. Narrative misdirection reshapes reality through framing and selective storytelling, ensuring that audiences interpret events in a specific way. Temporal misdirection alters the perception of time itself, distorting cause and effect relationships to obscure truth. Understanding these techniques is the first step in resisting them. The most dangerous forms of misdirection do not simply deceive. They create a false sense of certainty, making their targets believe they have reached conclusions independently. This guide does not aim to teach how to mislead, but rather how to detect and dismantle the forces that shape perception in unseen ways. The key to misdirection resistance lies in curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to question the stories, assumptions, and structures that guide attention. By learning to recognize misdirection in all its forms, we can begin to reclaim control over our own perception, seeing not just what is shown, but what is hidden behind the illusion. Physical misdirection controlling perception through sensory manipulation. Physical misdirection exploits the natural tendencies of human perception, using movement, contrast, and selective attention to manipulate focus. The key to its effectiveness lies in understanding how the brain prioritizes stimuli, often filtering out routine or unnoticed details. Physical misdirection unfolds in 3 interconnected stages. Perception serves as the foundation, shaping how observers interpret sensory input and what they naturally notice or ignore. Diversion strategically disrupts attention by introducing an exaggerated stimulus that overrides the brain's normal focus patterns. Focus control sustains the deception by guiding the observer's attention toward an intended narrative, while suppressing curiosity about other elements in the scene. In a well-executed act of physical misdirection, the observer's attention is not just manipulated, it is choreographed, ensuring they look exactly where they are meant to while the real action remains unseen. Physical misdirection succeeds when attention is directed with such precision that the observer never thinks to look elsewhere. To recognize it, one must resist the instinct to focus where attention is naturally drawn. When something feels overly emphasized, when a gesture is exaggerated, a sound is introduced at a key moment, or an object is made conspicuously important, it is often worth asking what is happening just beyond that point of focus. Diversion often takes the form of a sudden movement, a striking contrast, or an unexpected stimulus. Training oneself to resist reflexive attention shifts and instead scan the entire environment can expose what is meant to remain hidden. Focus control is more subtle, keeping attention anchored after the initial diversion has done its job. When an event seems deliberately prolonged, or an offbeat moment seems too perfectly placed, it is often a sign that misdirection is at work. Recognizing physical misdirection requires actively questioning where attention is being guided and, more importantly, where it is being discouraged from going. Psychological misdirection, exploiting thought patterns and cognitive biases. Psychological misdirection operates on the level of assumptions, mental shortcuts, and cognitive overload, rather than direct sensory distraction. By carefully managing expectations and overwhelming critical thinking, this form of misdirection leads individuals to false conclusions while making them believe they arrived at those conclusions independently. Psychological misdirection unfolds in three interconnected stages. Expectation sets the stage by guiding the observer toward a predictable assumption, creating a mental model that they unconsciously follow. Overload floods the cognitive system with excessive, misleading, or irrelevant information, making it difficult to process the deception critically. Substitution seamlessly replaces reality with a fabricated but convincing alternative, ensuring that the falsehood is not only accepted but often preferred over the truth. By the time the deception is complete, the target has been mentally guided toward a conclusion that feels inevitable, even though it was carefully engineered. Psychological misdirection operates on a deeper level than physical distraction. It exploits how people think, making them complicit in their own deception. The first sign of its presence is the feeling of certainty. When an outcome seems inevitable, when an assumption feels unquestionably correct, it is worth pausing to ask why. Often that certainty has been carefully cultivated through expectation, priming the mind to accept a false but intuitive conclusion. Overload can be recognized in moments where too much information is being presented at once, particularly when pressure is applied to make a quick decision. If clarity is being lost in a flood of detail, if questions lead only to more confusion, this is often an intentional effect rather than a natural occurrence. Substitution is perhaps the hardest to detect, as it presents a reality that appears preferable, or at least more easily accepted, than the truth. The best defense against it is skepticism. If a conclusion feels too neat, too emotionally satisfying, or too convenient, it is worth stepping back and questioning whether the information leading to that conclusion was truly examined, or merely presented for acceptance. Narrative misdirection, shaping reality through storytelling techniques. Narrative misdirection relies on the way people process stories, context, and framing to control interpretation. Instead of directly diverting attention like physical misdirection or overloading cognitive functions like psychological misdirection, it subtly restructures information to guide perception in a specific direction. Narrative misdirection unfolds in three interconnected stages. Framing, which dictates how information is presented, shaping the context in which an audience interprets an event. Emphasis, which strategically highlights or exaggerates secondary details, making them appear more important while distracting from the actual key information. Concealment, which ensures that crucial facts, alternative perspectives, or inconvenient truths remain hidden, leaving gaps in the audience's understanding. Narrative misdirection is particularly powerful in media, politics, and propaganda, where controlling perception is often more effective than outright deception. Narrative misdirection succeeds by controlling the lens through which reality is perceived. Its presence can be detected by looking at what is missing as much as what is present. When a story is framed in a way that evokes a strong reaction, whether outrage, sympathy, or certainty, it is worth asking what is being left out. If an event is presented in a way that seems suspiciously one-sided, if alternative perspectives are absent, framing is likely in play. Emphasis often reveals itself when an unimportant detail is given an outsized role in shaping the audience's perception. When attention lingers too long on a secondary aspect of a story, it is valuable to ask why that particular detail is being highlighted. Concealment is the most insidious of all. The best way to detect it is by searching for missing context. If key details, such as motivations, previous events, or contradictory information, are absent, it is likely that what is unseen is more important than what is presented. The strongest defense against narrative misdirection is curiosity, a willingness to seek out additional sources, question selective storytelling, and recognize when information is being shaped rather than simply reported is essential. Temporal misdirection, manipulating time to distort perception. Temporal misdirection takes advantage of the human tendency to assume linearity and causality, altering the way events are perceived through time-based distortions. By restructuring the order, pacing, and presentation of events, this form of misdirection creates false cause and effect relationships that lead observers away from the truth. Temporal misdirection unfolds in three interconnected stages. Sequence manipulation, which rearranges events to change perceived causality, making something appear to have happened before or after it actually did. Delay, which introduces temporal gaps between an action and its consequences, weakening the connection between them and making them easier to deny or misinterpret. Condensation, which compresses complex processes into oversimplified narratives, creating an illusion of inevitability or instant transformation. Temporal misdirection is often used in historical revisionism, legal defenses, and even storytelling, where the order of events can be more influential than the events themselves. Temporal misdirection is deceptive because it manipulates something taken for granted, the flow of time. The easiest way to recognize sequence manipulation is to ask whether the way information is presented reflects the way it actually unfolded. If a story appears to justify itself retroactively, if a conclusion is reached before all relevant information is revealed, it is likely that the sequence has been altered to create a false cause and effect relationship. Delay often makes itself known through conspicuous silence. When a response to an event seems slow in coming, when consequences seem oddly disconnected from their causes, it is worth considering whether the passage of time has been used to obscure responsibility. Condensation is most effective when it reduces a complex reality into a simple narrative. If a situation that logically should be intricate is presented as a single clear-cut event, it is often a sign that key steps have been compressed out of existence. The best way to counter temporal misdirection is to resist the instinct to accept the given timeline at face value. Seeking out the full progression of events, identifying what happened when, and restoring missing context can reveal how time itself has been used as a tool of deception. When to be most alert to misdirection? Misdirection is most effective when it goes unnoticed. It thrives in moments of distraction, assumption, and information overload, times when the mind is least prepared to question what it perceives. To resist it, one must develop a habit of awareness, recognizing the conditions under which each type of misdirection is most likely to occur. Be most alert to physical misdirection when movement, contrast, or exaggerated gestures demand attention. High-energy environments, such as performances, crime scenes, or political rallies, often use sudden actions or striking visuals to control perception. If something seems conspicuously emphasized, ask, "What am I not looking at?" Be most alert to psychological misdirection when a conclusion feels inevitable or a decision is rushed. Moments of cognitive overload, whether due to excess information, high-pressure persuasion, or emotionally charged narratives, are prime opportunities for manipulation. If certainty comes too easily, ask, "Am I following a conclusion or being led to it?" Be most alert to narrative misdirection when a story seems too neatly framed, with clear heroes, villains, and unquestioned assumptions. The strongest propaganda and biased reporting do not invent falsehoods. They shape reality by controlling which facts are presented and which are omitted. If an account evokes a strong emotional reaction but lacks nuance, ask, "What isn't being said?" Be most alert to temporal misdirection when cause and effect feel, oddly disconnected, or when historical context is missing. A change in sequence, a delay in response, or an overly simplified explanation can distort understanding. If an event's timeline seems suspiciously convenient, ask, "Is this the full picture or just the version I'm meant to accept?" The ability to resist misdirection does not come from paranoia, but from trained skepticism, a willingness to pause, question, and seek out hidden context. The most effective deception is not forced upon people, it is constructed so seamlessly that they accept it without resistance. To break free from misdirection, one must cultivate the habit of asking, where is my attention being guided and why? Perception is a battleground, and those who control attention control reality. The more we sharpen our awareness of misdirection, the less power it holds over us.